The Lone Fungus released on Steam, and it is a Metroidvania game that has pixel graphics and what I find to be taking a lot of elements from Hollow Knight. But did this game carve its own identity, or is it just a Hollow Knight ripoff? Let's find out together in this review on if A Lone Fungus is a good Metroidvania or not. Since I've already mentioned graphics, let's start with that. The Lone Fungus has pixel art graphics that range about 32 bits to 64 bits, so it's more akin to something of a Game Boy Advance graphics. While I do think the sprite arts are a bit tad simple compared to a lot of pixel art games these days, it more than makes up for it for the interesting locations and the set pieces littered around the world. You'll be traveling across purple grass fields, a futuristic sci-fi place, a frozen tundra, the gold mines, and even a graveyard-like place. There's a lot of locations to travel to, and the lands are filled with artifacts, relics, and friendly NPC statues that will uncover the truth of the past. There are hundreds of statues all over the place in the game, and most of them are discernible from one another, showing how much care, craft, and love the developer Sebastian Basti Burkic, but how much effort he has poured into the world. Then there is our main character, the Lone Fungus, Green Cap. He looks rather simple, but looks can be deceiving, because as you earn spells in the game by defeating the main bosses in the area, his color will change depending on the spell you equip. Similar to Mega Man, but a step further as Green Cap's mushroom head will also change in appearance based on what spell he is carrying, making this endearing little mushroom all the more visually appealing. The game has a variety of enemies and a large amount of bosses, each one unique to their own ecosystem. Some of them blend into the environment they exist in, others stick out like sore thumb. The bosses come in 3 types from what I can see. The rogue statues that wants to hunt you down, larger versions of the critters you'll find around the world, and finally, the embodiment of an element. Most of these bosses, in my opinion, don't look visually appealing, except for the statues, but I probably like the statue bosses the most because there's always lore behind it, which we will cover more on later on. In terms of gameplay, I want to talk about combat, world exploration, and platforming. With combat, Green Cap can collect many items that can boost his battle capabilities. The first of them are relics, which can range from passive effects to active ones. You have abilities that let you slowly regenerate mana, increase your weapon slash size, or have an opportunity to heal a life by striking an enemy when you drop to 1 health. And then there's also Barry. But in order to equip them, you gotta have enough points, which is through these web-like things at the bottom corner of the screen. You can collect these throughout the world map, but without the right amount, you won't be able to use the relic. So while it does limit your max potential, it offers customization that makes your experience of the game unique compared to other people's. Next up are the powers, which comes in 2 forms, the previously mentioned spells and the other one known as emblems. The spells as mentioned are collected when defeating the main boss. I find most of them to be very unintuitive to be used though, except for the Berserk one, which is more of a passive effect that increases your damage momentarily. But these spells mainly serve as the key to go into the next area, as more often than not, you need to use them to open a door. They can be used in combat as well, it's just that I never did, due to the spells have weird trajectory. What about the emblems? The emblems from what I've collected so far affect the way you parry. You have 3 charges of parry. Some emblems make it easier to parry, some will auto parry, but you'll only have 1 charge instead, and some will cause your parried projectiles home in on the target. I just use the one that auto parries since I'm old and washed up and my reflexes aren't as fast anymore. And then the last power-ups are abilities, but I'll talk about those later on, as they are mostly tied to world exploration and platforming. So you have a lot of options to change up the way you play, but unfortunately I find most of the bosses to be too unintuitive or uninteresting to make all of these wonderful power-ups to work. 9 times out of 10 I would learn the boss's pattern and then brute force my way through. Hardly would I think, hey, maybe I should use this spell to deal extra damage to the boss instead. I would just pogo on their head until death. But as you go further, bosses' attacks start to become more complex and would require you to learn their attacks and look for cues of the attack in order to dodge them appropriately. The bosses are no pushover, and it took me countless retries in order to beat most of the bosses. The bosses are hard though, so if you dislike hard bosses, I would recommend to play the game on easy mode. Time for world exploration, the meat and potatoes of all Metroidvanias. The world takes place underground, everything is underground and your goal is to reach the surface, to the outside world, but it's not that easy as there are obstacles blocking you to go to certain areas until you collect the respective upgrades. But the great thing about this game is that most places will always reward you with something, be it a new power up, a collectible, or some magic mushrooms to make your mana consumptions cost less. The game makes it relatively easy to know a certain collectible is in a location, as they tend to be in a room that is a dead end and will feature some tight platforming gameplay in order to collect them. The world map itself is also pretty large, and you'll find a lot of save stations scattered throughout the world. These stations are statues with a floppy disk carved onto it. Once you use one, you can use it to fast travel to other similar statues as well, making exploring new areas always a joy without having to re-go through the same areas too many times. So, the platforming. I would say the platforming gameplay is the main attraction for this game. I mentioned collectibles earlier. There are some mirror fragments and some ladybugs that sit at the very end of a room. These rooms require some of the most intense precision controls in order to get through. I spent 2 hours in one room just to try to collect a mirror fragment. The platforming gameplay I enhanced with a third set of power-ups that I skipped over earlier, called abilities. These abilities give you new way to traverse the world, such as the double jump, which is called upward dash in this game, a forward dash, a spin jump, wall kick, and more. In order to collect fragments of a collection, you must master these maneuvers. The game gives you a lot of options to move, but the problem is, there are too many buttons. What do I mean? Okay, I'll give you a perspective. Let's use the Switch controller for example. The B button on the controller is used for jumping. You press B again to double jump. You also have the Y button to do a forward slash, which is used for certain platforming to get launched forward. Pretty standard stuff at the moment, right? Let's move on. To do a downward slash, you can hold down and then the Y button to do a down slash, but it's better to use the X button to do a downward slash instead, so you've reduced it to one button instead of 2 button press. Now this is where it gets really convoluted. To do a forward dash, you have to press the R2 button, which if you use it, you can't use the double jump anymore. And in order to do a wall kick, you need to face towards a wall and press the L2 button. Then you can do a forward spin that can be performed on top of your double jump or your forward dash, which is located at the L1 button. That's 6 buttons you have to use for hard platforming challenges, but sometimes you might even need to combine certain moves together, like the L1 spin with the sword slash, in order to proc certain objects to aid you further, or how you need to combine L2 wall kick with L2 forward dash to make for a stronger wall kick. This is not mentioning that R1 is a button that allows you to spawn an object that you can bounce off of as well, but usually that's only needed at the very start of the challenge, so thank goodness. So many times my brain turned into mush, because I have to remember the correct button presses on a certain area at a fraction of a second. But honestly, this is all optional, and it isn't required to complete the game, so I'm not bashing the game about it or anything. I actually really love these challenges as I really love hard platformers, but the too many buttons complaint is legitimate. I felt like it was similar to Metroid Dread, but with these challenges I need precise accuracy with little to no reaction time in order to complete the puzzle. So many times I've choked and pressed the wrong button because I need to remember 6 buttons to do things. My hands were cramping really bad by then too, but other than that, you should have zero problems using the abilities to traverse the world's platforms, as the urgency isn't there. Plus, mastering these movement mechanics make the game really shine, as you have so many options to reach a path and glide through the terrain. And just before I get into the story, I want to talk about the user interface and the player experience a little bit. I have a little nitpick about a certain thing in this game, and that's when you press the pause button. You can't unpause the game by pressing the pause button again. You have to press the jump button in order to get out of the pause menu. It's not a deal breaker, but it was slightly annoying. There are also other hiccups here and there as well, like when you are scrolling through your weapon interface. If you're next to a statue during that time, it will prompt you to talk to the NPC statue as well while selecting your spells and whatnot. Again, it's not a deal breaker, but something I would like to point out. With that out of the way, now let's get into the story, which is the second main attraction. Greencap is the last mushroom known in existence in this place. Mushrooms are gods that created the land and statues that aid you in your quest. One day, all of the mushrooms disappeared, leaving only the land and the sentient statues behind. You are the last mushroom. Your origins are unknown, but it's very possible that you came from the outside world, and it's for that reason you are not like the other mushrooms that came before. You have the ability to harness other mushroom powers, and in turn, bring the mushrooms back into existence. The game will tell you how you have the power to bring the others back, but certain statues and critters have gone rogue. They are trying to stop you from bringing back the other mushrooms, for they believe they are now the rulers of the land. As you progress further, new truth starts to unravel itself. Some statues rebelled to old gods for they believe the old gods have forsaken them. Some of them even tell you that the old gods aren't as benevolent as they seem. It could be possible that the statues are losing their minds, or that they have a vendetta against the old gods, but many that have turned their backs on the old gods tells you that you will give your life up in order to bring the rest of the mushrooms back. Now the choice is yours. Do you follow the original path and possibly go down a path of self-destruction? Or do you find another way? Escape from fate. But this means you'll be forever alone, the only mushroom left to be the lone fungus. Overall, while this game features many elements similar to Hollow Knight, like the way both main characters swing their sword and the pogo gameplay, I think this game definitely carved its own identity from Hollow Knight. Calling this game a clone is a huge disservice and an insult to the creator of the game. If you haven't played The Lone Fungus yet, especially if you're someone who loves challenging platformers, or you love the deep lore when you're playing a game, it is an easy recommendation. And that's it for this review. I hope you enjoyed this video and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.